Hello, a very good morning. Welcome to the Mega News at 6. Good morning, Ghana. Good morning, Africa. Good morning, the rest of the world. Are we coming to you live from our 10th Avenue Extension, Greater Estate, Nwa at Bono? That's where we're located. My name is El Samuels. The news is also live on our social media handles on MBN 360. Well, let's take a look at the headlines.
Mahama promises major road upgrade for Bono region. In business, Bank of Ghana cuts policy rates to 14% despite Middle East risks. And on the international front, fuel shortages loom in Kenya and suppliers begin rationing petrol and diesel.
The President, John Dramani Mahama, has pledged a major overhaul of roads infrastructure in the Bono region, assuring residents that the area will see significant improvement before the end of his tenure.
He added that his broader vision is to position Ghana as having some of the best road networks in the West African sub-region by the time he leaves office. President Mahama made the remarks at Doma Ahinko during the launch of his Resetting Ghana tour. The Bono region would receive a major facelift on road infrastructure under my tenure, and by the time I leave office, Ghana's roads would be one of the best in the West African sub-region, he said. The president also disclosed plans to collaborate with Burkina Faso's leader, Ibrahim Traoré, to investigate the destruction of eggs transported from the Doma area to Burkina Faso. Meanwhile, the Omayini of the Doma traditional area and president of the Bono Regional House of Chiefs, Osagyefo Osiadeyo Ajimambedu II, appealed to the government to complete the abandoned Agenda 111 hospital project in the Doma Central Municipality. We know it is not easy. However, we appeal to you to get money to complete the abandoned Agenda 111 project at Amasu and the rest of the country, he said. He further called for support to expand infrastructure at the Doma Ahinko campus of the University of Energy and Natural Resources, citing growing demand for facilities at the institution.
The Ghana Journalists Association, GJA, has renewed calls for the repeal of what it described as repressive provisions with the Electronic Communications Act 2008, warning that the law is increasingly being used to intimidate journalists.
Addressing the press on Wednesday, March 18, GJA President Albert Kwabena Jumfo said the association remains concerned about the growing use of certain legal provisions to suppress media freedom and create fear within the profession. He argued that while state institutions, including the Ghana Police Service, have a mandate to investigate matters of public interest, such powers must not be exercised in ways that undermine the independence of journalists. This is why the GJA, alongside other media stakeholders, has consistently called for the repeal of what we describe as repressive sections of the Electronic Communications Act 2008. These laws are often weaponized to arrest, intimidate, and muzzle journalists, thereby creating an atmosphere of fear, he stated. Mr. Jumfo further emphasized that the protection of journalistic sources remains a fundamental principle of press freedom, insisting that journalists can only be compelled to disclose sources through lawful court processes. The GJA maintained that repealing the contentious provisions will help strengthen media freedom, safeguard democratic accountability, and ensure that journalists can operate without fear of harassment or intimidation.
Recent police invitation and interrogation of journalists. The Ghana Journalists Association, GJA, has taken note of recent development involving the invitation of some senior editors by the Ghana Police Service in February this year, and let me reiterate, by the Criminal Investigation Department of the Ghana Police Service in February this year. While we acknowledge the mandate of the police to investigate matters of public interest, we are compelled to express concern over a growing pattern that risks creating an atmosphere of fear within the media landscape. Journalists are not bound to disclose our source, except the court or the laws of this country compel us to do so. It's only the court that can compel a journalist to disclose his sources. Apart from that, apart from the rule of law that will compel journalists to do so, journalists are not, we are not under any compulsion, to disclose our source. And so he resisted. This is why the GJA, alongside other media stakeholders, has consistently called for the repeal of what we describe as repressive sections of the Electronic Communications Act, 2008, Act 775, and the Criminal and Other Offences Act. These laws are often weaponized to arrest, intimidate, and muzzle journalists, thereby creating a climate of fear.
The New Patriotic Party, the NPP, has declared its intent to reclaim political dominance in 2028 general election, insisting that no parliamentary seat held by the National Democratic Congress will be secured.
Minority Leader Alexander Afenyumakin made the remarks while addressing executives of the Tertiary Students' Confederacy TESCON in Parliament on Wednesday, March 18. He urged party members to intensify grassroots mobilization, stressing that victory will depend on discipline, loyalty, and sustained engagement with voters. If elections are held today, NPP will be the majority, but that will also require hard work and loyalty. We do not doubt our minds that you will take up the mantle, he stated. The Efutu MP criticized the current administration, accusing it of failing to deliver on key campaign promises, including the proposed 24-hour economy policy. He also cited the inability to increase cocoa producer prices and recent utility tariff hikes as signs of what he described as underperformance. He further called on TESCON members to reject claims that the NPP marginalizes certain ethnic groups, maintaining that the party remains inclusive and committed to representing all Guineans regardless of background. At the same event, the Member of Parliament for Ikuapem North, Samuel Eruku, reinforced the party's position, declaring that the NPP will aggressively contest every seat currently held by the NDC. We will be joining our colleagues to storm the campuses. The 2028 election is all play, all play. No NDC seat is safe. We will approach every NDC seat like a normal seat, he said.
Now we move to the business desk, where the Bank of Ghana has reduced its monetary policy rate by 150 basis points at 14%.
The decision, taken at the latest meeting of the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, on Wednesday, March 18, 2026, signals a continued shift toward monetary easing as macroeconomic conditions improve. Speaking at the 129th MPC press briefing, Governor Dr. Johnson Isiama cited improvements in domestic macroeconomic conditions and high prevailing real interest rates. However, monetary authorities remain cautious about external risks. The central bank identified escalating geopolitical tensions in the Middle East as a potential threat to the outlook, indicating its readiness to recalibrate policy should global conditions deteriorate.
The bank's latest forecast suggested that headline inflation will remain within the medium-term target. An upside risk to the inflation outlook includes the likely pass-through of higher crude oil prices and escalating geopolitical tensions. In the view of the committee, despite these upside risks to the inflation profile, the favorable domestic macroeconomic conditions, and also the high prevailing real interest rates, these provide scope to ease the policy rate further. Consequently, the MPC decided to reduce the monetary policy rate by 150 basis points to 14%. The committee will continue to closely monitor developments, especially in the Middle East, and its potential implications on the inflation outlook. The committee stands ready to take appropriate policy actions as needed to safeguard price stability. Isn't this cut problematic? Not at all. Remember, this has been 3 days of going through a lot of material, looking at the outlook, evaluating the issues. We look at the banking sector. It is now solvent, it is liquid, it's growing by way of assets. NPLs, yes, elevated, but it's coming down. The private sector credit beginning to recover.
Now, on the international front, motorists in Kenya may face difficulties accessing fuel after a report emerged that suppliers have begun rationalizing petrol and diesel, with some areas already experiencing shortages.
Several distributors, according to a news report by a Kenya-based news website, have run out of stock temporarily, raising concerns that the situation could worsen if delayed shipments fail to arrive soon. Martin Chomba told Bloomberg that the shortage is particularly severe in rural areas where several fuel stations have been forced to close due to stockouts. The biggest fuel suppliers to Kenya are rationing products. A few distributors are experiencing stockouts in the villages, he said. Experts warn that prolonged rationing could have serious economic consequences, affecting transport, businesses, and the cost of basic goods. Kenya consumes roughly 100,000 barrels of fuel per day, all imported through Mombasa, and by law, importers are required to maintain only 21 days of operational stock. Analysts say that even a single delayed shipment, potentially caused by the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, could push the country into emergency fuel levels within weeks. Across Africa, many nations face similar risks due to heavy reliance on fuel imports passing through the Strait of Hormuz, while wealthier countries compete aggressively for available consignments. The development comes just a week after the government assured Kenyans of adequate fuel supplies despite the Middle East conflict. Energy and Petroleum Cabinet Secretary Opio Wandai said on March 13 that the government was working with international oil companies under a government-to-government arrangements to prevent shortages. Meanwhile, the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority recently maintained fuel prices for the March 15 to April 14 cycle, with super petrol at 178.28 Kenyan shillings per litre, diesel at 166.54 Kenyan shillings, and kerosene at 152.78 Kenyan shillings, providing temporary relief for motorists even as fears of price hikes persist.
And this brings us to the end of this morning's mega news at 6. But let's move straight to the weather center. MBN Weather Center, in association with Ghana Meteorological Agency, will bring you the 24-hour impactful weather updates. Please don't go away. Now the weather update for the next 24 hours. We look at the temperatures and we'll bring a summary of the stories where early this morning, mist and fog patches are likely to form within the coastal, forest and hilly areas of the southern Ghana. Thereafter, most parts of the country will experience bright and sunny conditions. However, localized rain and thunderstorms may develop over a few coastal and inland areas later in the afternoon into the evening. Meanwhile, the northern sector will remain generally hot and sunny, with slight hazy conditions prevailing over the upper regions. The temperatures for the next 24 hours: coast a minimum 25, maximum 34. Forest minimum 23, maximum 35. Transition 22 degrees minimum, 38 degrees maximum. Northern 25 degrees minimum, 41 degrees maximum. And note that a rise in temperatures is anticipated across most areas, especially within the northern sector. And that brings us to the end of the weather update. If there's any unforeseen change in the weather pattern, we'll bring you up to speed. We'll get you updated. And this brings us to the end of this morning's Mega News at 6. But before we take leave of you, let's take a second look at the stories making headlines.
Mahama promises major road upgrade for Bono region. In business, Bank of Ghana cuts policy rates to 14% despite Middle East risks. And on the international front, fuel shortages loom in Kenya and suppliers begin rationing petrol and diesel.
The news came to you live from our studios on the 10th Avenue Extension, Greater Estate, and was also live on our social media handles on MBN 360. For more news, log on to MBN 360. Coming up next is a sports update. My name is El Samuels. Good morning.